All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on SERDP FY 2026 funding opportunities. My name is Laura Mack, and I will be moderating today's session. We'll get started in just a few moments, but while we wait for others to join, I'm going to cover just a few logistical items. So today's broadcast will be listen only. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, but at any time you can submit a question using the Q&A box on your control panel at the bottom of your screen. Please note that we won't be able to answer questions about specific proposal ideas or technologies during this webinar, and we'll prioritize questions that are generally applicable to all submitters. Please also note that the audio and the presentation of today's sessions will be archived on our solicitation page in case you'd like to refer to them in the future. We'll be dropping that link in the chat several times so that you all have that. And so to introduce everyone, today's speakers are Dr. Kim Spangler, the Executive Director of SERDP, Dr. Andrea Leeson, the Deputy Director of SERDP and the Environmental Restoration Program Manager, Dr. John LaScala, the Weapons Systems and Platforms Program Manager, and Kevin Hires, the Resource Conservation and Resilience Program Manager. Before I turn it over to Kim, I'd just like to remind everyone that you can use the Q&A box on the bottom of your control panel to submit questions at any time during the presentation. So over to you, Kim.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you all for joining us today. As Laura mentioned, I'm Kim Spangler. I'm the Executive Director for SERDP, and today I'm excited to share more about our FY26 funding opportunities. Each of our program managers here, Andrea, Kevin, and John, will provide more information about our FY26 statements of need. But before we do that, I'd like to provide a bit more background about SERDP for those who are unfamiliar with our work and how we enable the DoD mission. Go to the next slide, please. So today we're going to be speaking about SERDP, the one here on the left. SERDP is the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program. This program was started in 1991 and has had several decades of really impactful work for the Department of Defense. And that is done in conjunction with our joint agency partners with the Department of Energy and the EPA. SERDP invests in basic and applied research that addresses the DoD strategic objectives that relate to energy installations and the environment. In this program, we focus on identifying and addressing critical knowledge gaps that propel us forward towards groundbreaking scientific concepts and solutions. It's notable that SERDP is co-managed alongside its partner program, ESTCP. That's the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program. In ESTCP, we demonstrate and validate innovative environmental and installation energy technologies. The key for this program is that we provide critical cost and performance data that defense managers or our other partners require to implement improved technologies, which also are ultimately that reduces our adoption of technologies and capabilities at scale. So our programs are housed within the Office of Secretary of Defense for energy installations and environment. We work hand in hand with our implementing counterparts on the defense side for energy restoration, conservation, and other resilient projects or other resilient equities. What's been really key is that the projects that we've funded in this area provide the data and capabilities that DoD leadership needs to shape guidance and instruction. So this happens as we look at increasing the resilience of our military installations, as we protect our natural infrastructure that's critical to testing and training operations, and also improving the quality of life and readiness of our service members. This collaboration ensures that policy decisions that are made encourage and facilitate the adoption of scientific approaches, methodologies, and technologies that advance the DoD mission. So I don't know if everyone here is familiar with this, but there's a pretty staggering number of military bases that are required as the Department of Defense undertakes its mission to deter and fight if necessary. So we have 320 military bases that span a diverse region of, a diverse range of geographic regions within the United States. And as a result, the United States is a large landscape, and therefore there are different energy and environmental challenges that each of these installations face. To address this, our portfolio matches the breadth and scope of these issues. We look at developing technologies that restore and protect test and training lands. We demonstrate energy solutions that strengthen installations against disruption to the commercial electric grid. And we're also looking at really de-risking any threats that can occur to our installations. DoD has about 27 million acres of land. That is an incredibly large threat surface area as that relates to land, air, water, and energy, of course. And to do this, we really prioritize funding for 3 areas: restoration, resilience, and conservation. I want to touch a bit on how our program is set up as that relates to the solicitations. So our many research portfolios are organized across 6 program areas, 3 of which currently have open SERDP solicitations for FY26. That'll be our environmental restoration program area, the resource conservation and resilience program area, as well as the weapons systems and platforms program area. I think it's important that I provide a quick overview of each of these program areas, and then we'll let our program managers take care of more details there. So the environmental restoration program area that's led by Dr. Leeson focuses on managing PFAS and other emerging chemicals of concern in the environment. If you'll note here, there are about 575 impacted DoD sites and an estimated $25 billion in estimated PFAS cleanup costs that we're addressing within that portfolio. If we look at our resource conservation program area, that focuses on sustaining those 28 million acres of installation natural infrastructure for test and training ranges, and also looking at critical nearshore environments or environmental security threats to the military mission globally. And then finally on this slide, the weapon systems and platforms program area focuses on really supply chain type risks and reducing the environmental impact of weapon systems and platforms operations and maintenance. We do not at this point have funding opportunities currently open under the next 3 program areas within SERDP, but I do encourage folks to keep an eye out for upcoming ESTCP solicitations related to these portfolios. Our munitions response program area focuses on unexploded ordnance in the underwater environment, including ponds, lakes, rivers, estuaries, and coastal ocean areas. After years of successful investment within SERDP, this program area is currently transitioning, SERDP and ESTCP. This program area is currently transitioning technologies to end users through a series of test sites and live site demonstrations. We're incredibly excited about the amazing work that's been conducted by the innovators that have been funded in this program area, and look forward to providing capability to the DoD in the very near term. Our climate resilience, our installation energy and water program area demonstrates and validates technologies that enhance resilience against disruption to public energy and water infrastructure. There are about $4.7 billion of installation energy costs that we are looking to avoid here. In addition, as I mentioned before, there's just a really large threat surface for energy and water systems, and we're working on addressing the resilience of that as well. And finally, our climate resilience program area focuses on the full range of climate related threats to installations. There's about $400 billion of installation infrastructure. DoD has a $1.2 trillion real property investment, and we are really working on the ability of our installations to adapt to what we see as being ongoing issues with hazards that are impacting our installation. Who do we fund? So this is what has enabled SERDP and ESTCP to have a really amazing return on investment for the Department of Defense broadly. And that's because the Department of Defense, the folks here that are on this line, we're leveraging the full potential of our nation's innovators and our institutions to meet the pacing threats posed by our adversaries. We have funding opportunities that are open to government, industry, and academia. And in doing this, we're really able to provide ready access who are deeply to folks who are deeply familiar with defense needs. I'll also note that when folks receive funding through our program areas, you get access to an incredible group of subject matter experts that represent the end user community, the government innovation community, as well as cohorts of projects so that you'll be able to meet people across the nation and global innovation complex. So at this point, I'm handed over to Dr. Andrea Leeson. She's the Deputy Director for SERDP and ESTCP, and also the Environmental Restoration Program Manager. She's going to cover a bit more about the SERDP solicitations themselves, the proposal selection process, and the proposal selection criteria before moving on to discuss the environmental restoration statements of need. Over to you, Andrea.
All right, thanks so much, Kim, and thanks everyone for being here today. As Kim said, what I'd like to do now is give you a little bit of an overview about how the SERDP solicitation works, and then we will go into describing the statements of need, and each program manager will describe their own statements of need, and we'll go into the Q&A. So with the SERDP solicitation, we make multiple awards per statement of need. We really don't have a set number of proposals that we plan to fund per statement of need. It really comes down to the technical merit. The proposals we fund are multi-year proposals or the limited scope proposals, which are the smaller one-year efforts. And we have two avenues for funding projects. One is through the broad agency announcement. This is open to the private sector, which includes the university, industry, and non-governmental organizations. And then we have our federal call, which is for the Department of Defense, as well as for other federal agencies. Next slide, please. So this gives you the overall SERDP proposal selection process. So let me walk through this a little bit and show you where we're at in the process. We developed our statements of need generally over the summer. And then we move into releasing the solicitations in early November. So at this point, we did release that about 10 days ago, I believe. So those are out for everyone to view. And then we have a two-step process where we request a pre-proposal first, which is due in early January. We will go over the dates in a moment. The pre-proposals are intended as a shorter white paper. They're 5 pages in length and just an estimate of the cost. And this allows the SERDP staff to review the pre-proposals, make sure they're aligned with what we were requesting in the statements of need before you, as the investigator, puts too much time into a full proposal. A full proposal is quite a bit more effort. So this is our effort to make sure that the topic you're proposing aligns with what we are seeking before you go to the effort of a full proposal. So we get the pre-proposals in early January. We will send comments or requests for a full proposal back no later than early February, with full proposals due in early March. All proposals we receive go out to peer review for scientific merit evaluation. That peer review is very similar to any peer review that you would do for a journal article, where we seek experts in the field to provide reviews on the proposals. When that peer review is complete, the peer review, along with all proposals, go to our technical committees. And the technical committees are made up of representatives from numerous federal agencies, as well as some subject matter experts. And they assess that peer review and based on prioritization, make a recommendation to the SERDP staff. That final selection is done over the summer, generally by July, and then all projects go before our scientific advisory board in the fall for final approval. Next slide. So here are the solicitation dates. The pre-proposals will be due on January 7th, 2025 at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a hard deadline. You cannot miss this. Everything is submitted online. So if you go to this link here at the bottom of this page, you will be able to find additional information, but that is a very hard deadline. We must receive the pre-proposals by that date. As I said, full proposal request will go out in early February. You must receive a request for a full proposal in order to submit the full proposal. If you have not received that request and submit a full proposal, it will not be accepted. Full proposals are due March 13th, 2025. And then those selection notifications are not sent at that stage until July or August. And that's because, as you see, we have a number of review process in between the time we receive the full proposal and the time we're ready to send the selection notifications. Presentation to the Scientific Advisory Board is in actually September, possibly through November, with project initiation sometime in spring 2026. Next slide, please. This provides our solicitation success statistics, and we look at it in two ways. You can look at it from pre-proposal to selection or the full proposal to selection itself. So certainly, if you get to the full proposal stage, that percentage of projects or proposals that are selected is quite a bit higher than at the pre-proposal stage, and that's because once you get to the full proposal stage, you have already passed a screening level about in terms of at least the relevance to the program area. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do here is walk through the proposal selection criteria, and all of this is available in the instructions for proposals. The very first criterion that we have is, does the submitted proposal address the SON objectives? This is critical, that you are very clear that your proposal meets the SON objectives. And I often recommend people explicitly discuss how the proposed effort meets those SON objectives. If you have a topic and it doesn't really fit, but you submit anyway, it is unlikely to pass that initial criteria of pass-fail. We also look at the maturity level of the proposed effort. SERDP is an R&D program, so anything that is much too mature, much too advanced, will probably not be appropriate for SERDP. We look at next, after the pass-fail, we're looking very carefully at the technical merit. This is by far the most important criterion for us after the relevance. And here we're just looking at the overall scientific and technical merit. We also look at personnel in terms of qualifications and experience in the proposed area. We look at the cost, and then once you get to the full proposal stage, we're also looking at the transition plan for the technology. Next slide, please. So the hallmarks of the competitive proposal is that it will clearly address the statement of need. It meets the objectives that we're seeking, and we are clear in our statements of need. You will see in many of the statements of need, there will be multiple sub-objectives, and we'll be clear when in the statement of need. Certainly under environmental restoration, I believe for all of them, we say that you can address one or more of the sub-objectives. You do not have to address all, but just read the statement of need carefully to be able to determine that. We're looking that the proposal demonstrates a clear understanding of the state of the science that you need to know about to support the effort that you're proposing. We are looking for hypothesis-driven work and tasks. So please be very clear. What are the hypotheses that you'll be working around in your proposed effort? And then we really need a strong focus on the technical approach. You should certainly put most of the effort there in terms of providing as detailed as possible a description of your technical approach with a clear experimental design. Next slide, please. So at this point, what we're going to do is talk about the FY26 statements of need. Next slide, please. I will present first on the environmental restoration statements of need, and then I'll pass it on to the other program managers. I did want to emphasize here that for each of the statements of needs that you'll see online, you will see an associated program manager who is associated towards the bottom of the statement of need. If you have any questions about the process or the statement of need, don't hesitate to reach out to those program managers. We cannot answer very specific questions about your topic. So please don't ask a question such as, here's what I'm going to propose, does this fit? We can't answer those questions. That would violate the terms of the solicitation. But what we can answer are general questions about how the process works. And if you don't quite understand something about the statement of need, we can also discuss those kind of questions. And you'll see that today. If you do have questions that you'd like asked or addressed during today's session, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will answer as many questions as we can. But if the question is too specific, you will not hear us address that during the call. Next slide, please. So under environmental restoration, we've released 3 statements of need. All of these are addressing PFAS, polyfluoroalkyl substances in some way. This first one is dealing with the ecological toxicity of PFAS at sites impacted by AFFF. There's been quite a bit of effort over the years so far now at looking at PFAS environmental toxicity. So it's really important, you will see this in the statement of need too, that proposers are familiar with this body of effort and are building on it. So we've provided parameters of interest for this topic area, but what we're really trying to do is broaden our understanding of PFAS toxicity in the environment. We're also looking at development of new methodologies that might be used to assess these biological effects more efficiently. So that's what we're looking at with this statement of need. Next slide, please. We also have a statement released about development of real-time sensors for the detection and quantitation of PFAS in soil and groundwater. For those of you in the PFAS realm, you know that what we need to do now is we collect samples and the samples go off to the lab. But what would be really helpful is if we also had real-time sensors to assist with, delineating the site where we should take additional samples for further analyses in the lab, et cetera. So we have put out a request for development of real-time sensors for PFAS. Next slide, please. And then finally, we are expanding on some work we've also been doing, and this will be looking at further developing our understanding of the transformation of the polyfluoroalkyl substances that are in soil and groundwaters. Again, this is another area of work where there has been a lot of work done in the past several years in this area, and so we want to build on what's already been done to further our understanding of these issues. And ultimately what this is better understanding these issues helps us ultimately develop better site conceptual models for our impacted sites. And so that is what we're looking for here, is that supporting information for us to use at these sites. Next slide. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Kevin Hires, who is the Program Manager for Resource Conservation and Resilience, and he'll be talking about the statements of need released under his program area. Kevin?
Thank you, Andrea. And just do a quick sound check, make sure that everything is working on mic before I get started.
Everything's good.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, folks on the East Coast. Good morning, West Coast. I'm Kevin Hires. I am the Program Manager for the Resource Conservation Resilience Program, and I'll go through the 3 statements of need that we released this year. Next slide. The first statement of need is developing robust, evaluating habitat-based approaches for the conservation and management of species of concern. And under this statement of need, we're looking for programs that strengthen strengthen the science foundations of habitat conservation strategies, particularly for multiple species of concern. Also looking for proposals that identify relationships between management and conservation of habitat and population status of species concern, and those conditions that must exist for habitat-based approaches to succeed. Specifically, sub-goals will be proposals should address assessing the links between population status, trajectories, and ecosystem level indicators, testing correlations of different ecosystem performance indicators, determining the size and scale of an area in which a habitat-based approach will likely be effective, and evaluating conservation outcomes for rare plant taxa, specifically under habitat-based approaches designed for wildlife. Next slide. The second statement of need is mechanisms, pathways, and outcomes of ecosystem transformation. We're looking for proposals that advance our understanding of the processes, pathways, outcomes, and of recent and ongoing ecosystem transformations on DoD lands and waters critical to the DoD mission. Proposals should investigate the interactions among environmental factors that drive ecosystems into diverse pathways away from historical states of ecosystem composition, structure, and function. Should disentangle the key ecological processes that lead to ecosystem transformation and develop a mechanistic model for that transformation. Like proposals to identify critical environmental and/or ecological thresholds or events that may drive transformation for specific ecosystems, and develop indicators to anticipate system proximity to those critical thresholds. Next slide. The last statement of need is developing robust long-term baselines for ecosystem dynamics and environmental change in key DoD geographies. We're looking for proposals to determine the antiquity, range of variability, and climate sensitivity of DoD relevant terrestrial and peatland ecosystems in the key DoD geographies. Specifically, we'd like proposals to determine how and when paleoecological services can be utilized to effectively set ecological restoration benchmarks, goals, or practices, refine and test and apply indicators for paleoecological, paleoenvironmental inference, characterize historic disturbance regimes where possible on these landscapes, assessing the role of indigenous peoples in creating and maintaining prehistoric systems, and determining the extent to which current land use practices, environmental changes have driven ecosystem changes since European settlement. Next slide. Now I'll introduce and turn over the presentation to my colleague, Dr. John Lascala, who runs our Weapons Systems and Platforms program. John. John, we'll do a quick sound check.
Okay, can you hear me now, Kevin?
Got you loud and clear. Over to you.
Okay, excellent. So good afternoon. The first statement of need, let's go to the next slide, for weapon systems and platforms is on solvent alternatives. Solvents are used in various processes in the maintenance cycle for weapon systems and platforms. Solvents are used in operations to remove and apply coatings, adhesives, and sealants, and they are used in various cleaning and surface activation processes. It is important for alternative solvents to be sustainable. Overall, the alternative solvent should reduce risk of workplace exposures and reduce the need for personal protective equipment. They should eliminate the use of chemicals with risk evaluations under TSCA. They should reduce or eliminate use of emerging chemicals of concern, hazardous air pollutants, and volatile organic compounds. And they should be relatively safe with lower toxicity relative to the incumbent solvent. It's extremely important that the solvents function from the intended application, for example, cleaning or depainting. The statement of need lists some of the relevant military specifications, but it's not necessarily inclusive. There are various other applications that can be found within the DoD that don't have a specific military spec associated with it. The solvent must maintain low flammability or reduce flammability. One point of note is there are various tools to predict solvency, but these tools focus on thermodynamics and they generally ignore, say, the kinetics of solvation, evaporation rates, flammability, and other characteristics that are important towards designing a solvent for a DoD application. Lastly, the alternative solvent solutions need to be scalable and relatively cost-effective, which we recommend assessing through an appropriately scaled life cycle assessment. Next slide. The second statement of need is on sustainable flexible primer coatings with a focus towards aircraft, but application to ground systems is not precluded. It has been observed that coating failure can occur during installation of fasteners and during high structural loading scenarios. This could lead to faster and higher rates of corrosion. Flexible primers have been developed in the past, but these have contained significantly higher VOC and HAP content than typical coatings, relegating them to use in specialty applications only. And they've also been very difficult to remove at the end of life. So new flexible primer coatings should have improved moisture barrier properties relative to the standard aviation primer coatings, MIL PRF 23377, and they should have comparable performance to some of these flexible primers that exist out there, such as the 32239, 81733, etc. They must be removable using standard depainting technologies, and they must be compatible with composite, aerospace aluminum, titanium, magnesium, and other typical alloys used in aerospace applications, as well as common pretreatments, inorganic coatings, and sealants used in aircraft. These primer coatings must also be sustainable. They should eliminate the use of chemicals with risk evaluations under TSCA. They should reduce or eliminate the use of emerging chemicals of concern, hazardous air pollutants, and volatile organic compounds. And they should not contain chromium corrosion inhibitors. And lastly, the flexible primer coatings need to be scalable and relatively cost-effective, which we recommend assessing through an appropriately scaled life cycle assessment. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Leeson.
Great. Thank you, John. All right. So we are going to now talk about the symposium briefly. I'm sorry, I will put the camera on. Here we go. This is very exciting for us. We have an annual symposium every year. And this year it will occur the week after Thanksgiving in the Washington, D.C. area. Information about the symposium, the very detailed technical agenda, etc., is available at the link you will see here. But this is a fantastic event to see everything that SERDP and ESTCP and the OE program fund. We have over 30 technical sessions. We will have well over 600 different posters. And typically every project we fund attends the symposium and either provides a platform or poster presentation. So if you haven't attended in the past, I do recommend attending to see what's going on with the program. Next slide, please. So at this time, I am going to turn it over to Laura Mack to moderate our Q&A session. Laura?
All right, so we have received a number of questions, which we're going to try and work through. But just a reminder that we will be prioritizing questions that are generally applicable to all submitters. So this first question I'm going to give to Andrea. If a DoD organization collaborates with an academic partner, can the academic partner serve as a co-PI, or is it necessary to go through the contracting process as with a BAA?
So that's not particularly straightforward, but so a federal lead can have a non-federal person or entity as a co-PI, absolutely, and that is a very common process. But please do keep in mind that particularly as a DoD organization, you will still need to go through the appropriate contracting process to work with your non-federal partner. We do not do that for you. When the DoD is the lead, we expect you to contract with your non-federal co-performer. So you would need to be prepared to do that and to be able to follow all the federal regulations for the contracting process.
Okay, moving on to a question for John. In the statement of need that is sustainable, flexible primer coatings for aircraft, Could you please provide a little more guidance on how to interpret the flexibility aspect here?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of those details are provided in those other military specifications, MIL PRF 32239, Class 2, the high flexibility coding system. There's also information within MIL PRF 81733 and TTP 2760. Those details can be found, those military specifications can be found through the ASSIST website. We recommend you take a look at that. Anyone has access to those. That's not government only. So please utilize that. And I believe there was a citation to that provided in the statement of need.
Right. This question is for Andrea. Is the same PI allowed to submit pre-proposals to both the core solicitation and the 1-year seed solicitation?
I don't believe I'm wrong on this, but I don't think we have a formal seed solicitation this year. Yes, all of them are core. But within every statement of need, you can submit what we call a limited scope proposal, which is very similar in format to a seed in that they're roughly a 1-year proposal with a $250,000 limit. And we do not put limits on investigators in terms of the number of pre-proposals you submit. So you can certainly submit more than one pre-proposal, or, and Laura, I think I'm answering another question here while I'm doing this, but you can, for example, be the lead on one pre-proposal and a co-investigator on another. That's perfectly acceptable. You perhaps have to think about your own workload, if it's all, but we don't make that call for you. So it is possible.
Okay. And Andrew, here's another ER specific question. For real-time sensors aimed at the detection and quantification of PFAS, are you specifically looking for biological sensors, chemical sensors, or both? Additionally, what are the desired detection limits for these sensors?
Regarding the type of sensor, we are not, we don't have any guidelines for that into our requirements, I should say, for that. You should propose what you think would be the best fit for developing a field sensor in that way. In terms of the detection limits, I would certainly say they ought to be able to meet the limits that the EPA has released recently. You certainly would want to be able to detect to those concentrations, and I would recommend just going to the EPA guidelines that they've released recently for the new list of chemicals of concern within the PFAS realm.
Okay, this question is for Kevin. Does DoD maintain a list of sensitive species that occur across DoD, or is this specific to individual installations?
There is not an official list. However, if you, I can try to share the web link to the Department of Defense Environmental Exchange DNIX website, where certain groups of species, like Partners in Flight, has compiled a list of priority species, as well as partners in conservation with the Department of Defense, like NatureServe, have comprehensive lists by installations where they've compiled them. It is important to recognize that the call is not just for any species of concern, but really directly addressing the needs of or the efficacy of habitat-based management solutions of those species. And so important not to just look for species at risk, but focus on those habitat-based conservation outcomes.
This is a question for Andrea, and I think this might answer a few questions. Can an international university be a lead performer or co-performer on a proposal?
Yes, we don't have restrictions about that. We can fund international universities, or, for example, I believe there's another question that was asked later that I think it was very specifically, can someone from Canada or the UK be a co-performer? And yes, that's all allowable.
Okay. All right, this question is for Kevin. On the mechanisms, pathways, and outcomes of ecosystem transformation topic, can you clarify what type of ecosystem transformation that you'll focus on? For example, wildfire, flood, or drought?
We're not limiting our transformations to any one natural hazard. It is going to be up to the proposer to make sure that they're working with transformations that are relevant to Department of Defense installations and in those key geographies, such as the desert Southwest, Alaska, Southeast Coastal Plain, Hawaii. But any drivers of sudden and rapid ecological transformation will be considered.
And Kevin, another question related to that same topic. In general, will you prefer a 2-year or 3-year proposal for that topic?
We do not limit the timeline to any specific number of years. It is always encouraged to be efficient, but we do take proposals that are built around budgets and timelines that meet the needs of the objectives of the individual proposer.
All right, this question is for Andrea. Is it possible to see examples of currently funded projects for reference?
It is, you're able to see some of the information on those projects. Our website, thank you, Laura, for keeping up this slide. If you go to the SERDP website that's listed on the slide there, we have web pages for an individual web page for every project we fund. So what will be there is a brief description of the project. It gives the contact information for the lead investigator. And then once they have documents and reports being published, those reports are linked there. And then finally, as they get peer-reviewed publications out, we also post those at the bottom of those project web pages. So there's quite a bit of information available on the project, the SERDP website.
And I just put a link in the chat to the project directory page where you can search for all of the project overviews.
Thank you.
All right, another question for Andrea. How important is it for larger industry organizations to partner with universities on proposals?
We don't really have guidelines on that. I can say generally, a lot of the very successful projects, and by successful, I don't just mean they're selected. I mean, in the grand scheme of, implementing a project, a lot of those really successful projects are partnerships. So I think those kind of partnerships are very important, but it doesn't always make technical sense. And so for us, we really emphasize what makes sense technically. Sometimes it's a smaller lab-based effort and, just the university may do it. But when you're starting to get into the realm of something that's more, along the lines of advanced development, then those partnerships become pretty important as we're moving into the transition of technologies or knowledge.
This is a question for Kevin. For the developing robust long-term baselines for ecosystem dynamics and environmental change in key DoD geographies how important is it that research takes place on DoD lands, or is it that outcomes generally reflect the needs outlined in the statement of need?
It's the latter. Clearly understanding and having connections to the Department of Defense needs are absolutely essential, but it is not essential to perform the work on DoD lands, just within those geographies and understanding the Department of Defense need.
Right. This question is for John. For the solvent alternatives, are projects that study the performance of aqueous alternatives open for consideration? Part 2 projects are exploring sealed airless vacuum solvent systems under consideration. Sorry, I'm not sure on that second part of the question.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Thanks for the question. So yeah, as far as aqueous alternatives are certainly open for consideration. At the same time, it's important to consider the performance of the solvent for the intended application, and you want to explain why and how these aqueous solvents would be effective. So that's a key aspect of the proposal. As far as Other technologies that would assist in this, such as airless vacuum solvent systems and such like that. Again, want to consider how effective it would be and how transitionable this could be for a DoD process. For things that require significant amount of engineering, this might be a more expensive process. So if it's something that's simple paint removal, may not be the greatest of concepts, but if it's something more detailed cleaning need for a very expensive part, then this could very well be transitionable. Something for you to consider in the proposal. Over. Thank you.
Okay, here's a more general question for Andrea. If requested, what is the length of the full proposal?
The full proposals are 15 pages with a number of various attachments that are required. All of that information will be clearly laid out in the full proposal instructions, which will be provided to those who investigators where we request a full proposal.
Okay, and then another question for you, Andrea. For a multi-year proposal, is it $250K per year?
Great. This is related to another question that we got a little bit later about maximum amount per year. But first, the $250,000 dollar question. The multi-year proposals are not restricted to that. That is only a restriction for those that are proposing a one-year limited scope proposal. For multi-year proposals, we really don't have a min or max. We tell people that they should propose what they need to complete the scope of work that's been proposed. Having said that, that amount per year ranges from, 100K maybe to 500K. But there's no hard and fast rules on that. We look at that carefully. That, when we evaluate the technical merit, we're looking at the level of effort proposed and does it appear to meet what's needed for the technical that is being proposed.
Okay, a question related for Andrea related to the ER statements of need. Are technologies related to PFAS destruction applicable to any of the current statements of need?
I don't see how they would be applicable this year, and we do not. There was another question that has not been asked yet that the statement of needs explicitly on PFAS destruction was not. They didn't see it this year, and that is correct. We do not have a specific statement of need on PFAS destruction, and I don't see how it would fit with the current statements of need.
Okay, this question is for Kevin. For the evaluating habitat-based approaches for the conservation and management of species of concern statement of need, is there a way to find out particular species or habitats of concern for individual installations?
There are several ways, including I think we'll be able to put the link to the DNIX website in the chat, which will allow proposal teams to access some of the partners in flight data. But every installation has an integrated natural resource management plan that covers all species of concern and planned habitat manipulations and management to recover those species. So it would be important for any proposal team thinking about a specific installation to access that public facing document to understand both the species and the habitat management approaches being used by the installation.
Okay, this is a question for John. Regarding the flexible primer statement of need, will a solution containing PFAS be considered?
No, they will not.
Okay, this question is for Andrea. Can a current postdoc researcher, sorry, hold on. Can't see the full.
Is that the one where can a current postdoc
Researcher
submit as a lead?
Yeah, lead a proposal if they will finish their postdoc after a project has started.
Yes, we have no restrictions on that. postdoc can lead a proposal. It's very similar to any other investigator. We look at level of experience, et cetera, and all the other factors involved in evaluating the proposal, but there is no restriction.
Okay, and another question, more general question for Andrea, is a DoD partnership required or desirable for a successful proposal?
We don't require a DoD partnership, and, occasionally, I can't think offhand, which statements of need may require field work. That's often a consideration. If you aren't familiar with the DoD, if you don't have connections with DoD entities, it's not a concern. We can always work with you, and we frequently do. We will work with you to help you make those connections with the DoD liaisons who can best help you complete your research. It's important in your pre-proposal, if you do need that connection, to really be explicit about that you'll need access to a DoD data or a site, et cetera, and lay out your parameters for what you need. So just so that we're aware of that, but we would work with you on that.
Okay, this is a question for Andrea for one of the ER statement of need on real-time sensors. This statement of need states to develop a real-time sensor for detection and quantification. I assume this means development of a single sensor type to replace traditional laboratory testing. Does it include the development of a sensing system to monitor a whole site that includes multiple sensors that quantify the whole site?
Yeah, we're perhaps straying into the territory where we would be commenting on a specific idea, so I don't want to do that. What I would suggest is look at the statement of need carefully and see what it is and is not asking for. I will say that I do not believe the statement of need said it has to be a single sensor. So I can take a look at the statement of need and assess that.
Okay, and then a more general question for you, Andrea. Is preliminary data required for a pre-proposal?
It is not required. We do allow a 3-page attachment if you have some preliminary data you would like to highlight, and that way it doesn't take away from your page limit. But it's not required. But if you have it and would like to illustrate what you've seen so far, that's great.
Okay, this question is for John. Would PFAS solvents be considered in the solvent alternative statement of need?
No, they would not. Over.
All right, and then this question is for Kevin. Are any of the key DoD geographies restricted to Alaska and the southeastern United States? Oh wait, Kevin, you're muted.
Apologies there. Is this question specific to SON number 3 on paleoecological investigations? So if so, we specifically call out a preference for proposals that are looking at peatlands in the southeastern United States and Alaska, but not restricted to. So we will accept proposals more broadly in key DoD geographies, but we specifically have prioritized those 2 regions for that investigation, SON number 3.
This question is for Andrea. Are there written pre-proposal guidelines available for proposed budget requirements and other logistics?
Yes, we do have specific guidelines for how to structure your pre-proposal. I will say the costing part is quite simple for a pre-proposal. We're really just asking for an estimate of your cost, and even that estimate is just to provide us a cost per year in total, and then the total for what you're proposing. We do not ask for a cost proposal at this stage, nothing formal. And the pre-proposal does not require a signature from your cost people because we're not asking for that at this stage. So that cost is really quite simple for the pre-proposal.
Okay, and then a related question, can salaries for employees of federal agencies be included in the budget?
We don't have a restriction on that. That, it really varies from federal agency to agency in terms of what they are able to put into proposals, but they can't. So we can cover federal salaries as it's appropriate for your organization.
All right, this question is for Kevin. Regarding the evaluating habitat-based approaches statement of need, is this focused on installations or could it also include training areas internationally?
It can absolutely include international sites of DoD interest or training.
All right, and this question is for John. This is for the solvent alternative statement of need. Several examples of relevant industrial operations are listed. Is there a prioritization of the most critical targeted operations?
Thanks for the question. No, there is not a priority in terms of which ones we would fund. We would consider proposals against any one of those or many of those areas. Thank you. Over.
This question is for Andrea. For PFAS toxicity, is it essential to target mixtures or are individual PFAS considered?
We do address that in the statement of need in terms of what is of interest. But we, again, this is a reminder, please read the statement of need carefully, but I do not believe we restricted that statement of need to mixtures. So, but I do remember there is language in there specifically about analytes that are not of interest. So please do read it carefully.
Okay, this question is for Andrea. Do awards include full university F&A?
So when you develop your cost proposal, the normal sort of overhead that a university or any entity might put on to a proposal can be included. I will say, though, that one, I am not a contracting officer, nor are any of the program managers. You would work with a contracting officer to make sure everything in that cost proposal is appropriate and follows the federal regulations for costs. So that will be the step you'll want to take.
Okay, this question is for John. Will the solvent have to be available commercially already?
Yeah, this is a good and kind of difficult question in a number of ways because, ultimately to be utilized in a DoD operation, it's going to need to pass TSCA restrictions. It's going to, or TSCA regulations. It's going to be something that's going to be enabled to be commercially sold. So it needs to go through a number of barriers or hurdles along the way before it can be utilized. Nothing actually needs to be, past all those hurdles, but there should be an established pathway that that would indicate that there would be very good promise for a chemical to go through that process. At the same time, something that has already gone through that entire process and looks very promising will honestly be prioritized over something that is a completely new chemical, never been addressed in terms of toxicity or the ability to ship it nationally and to use it nationally. So those are things to consider. Thank you.
Okay, I think this is somewhat related to some questions, but a bit different. This is for Kevin. What are the key DoD geographies, or can we find a resource that outlines them? And does this vary by statement of need?
That's a very good question. I'm going to point to two resources. Under our climate resilience ESTCP program, we've just closed and a call for technologies in key DoD geographies. It has a very specific description of what we're looking for. But we also would point proposers to the Sentinel Landscape Program hosted by the Readiness Environmental Integration Protection Integration Initiative, REPI, as a source of key DoD geographies and a list of those Sentinel landscapes.
All right, I'm trying to put the link into the chat to the, I think what I just put into the chat was the recently closed call for proposal that you were referencing, Kevin. Okay, let me see. All right, this is a question for Andrea. Is there a strict maximum duration for a project?
We don't have a strict maximum duration. However, we are not fans of long duration projects. I would say 3 to 4 years is generally what we see and prefer. It's very important to us that, you know, the work gets out there to our end users. We're very mission focused, and we are looking to transition the research in a timely manner. So very long projects are generally not of interest.
All right, I think that about wraps up questions that we have, unless Andrea, if you saw any other ones.
I think we're good. Laura, thank you so much.
All right, then I'll just close with a reminder that if folks have any other questions related to the statements of need, you can reach out to the appropriate program manager for those. And this presentation was recorded and will be available on the SERDP website afterwards, along with the presentation slides that are already available on one of the links that was provided in the chat. So unless folks have anything else, I think that concludes our webinar for today. So thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah.